This meeting is being recorded.
Ready to go, Mark. Over to you. Thank you.
Is that full screen, Peter?
Now it is, yes.
Lovely. Good, thank you. And welcome everybody. Lovely to see a good turnout, and thank you for CDPS, obviously, for organising this lunchtime session. As Peter mentioned, informal, so if you want to switch your cameras off, and happy for you to have a munch of your pot noodle while I'm not looking. That's ideal for us. I'm Mark Davis. I'm the digital program lead at Campws. If you're not familiar with the name Campws, we were formerly called the Wales Cooperative Centre up until about 4 or 5 months ago. So there's been a bit of a rebrand. So I've been working with Campws and previously Wales Co-op Centre since 2006. I've been working with them on digital programs this whole time. And prior to joining Campws, I was involved with digital programs right from the late noughties, early noughties, and in the late 90s when kind of digital started to kick off. I'm going to cover with you today some background context of the challenges, the context of Wales, the challenges we face when considering adopting digital strategies. It's learning. Both a colleague of mine, Paul Stepchek, who was on this call today, have picked up collectively. So we've been working as a team really to get to where we are today. And everything I'll be discussing today is as a result of our kind of research and our activity on the ground directly with groups. So we'll go over some of the challenges, why they're challenges, the practical next steps you can take, and obviously we'll end up then with that one pager, what we've trialed in the field and seems to be working really well with organizations in taking digital actions forward. Yeah, in this picture here, Peter told me if these lunch and learn sessions take off, he's going to start selling this version of a keyboard, and so they'll be available in the new year on eBay, I think, in Peter's account. So first and foremost, the key thing for us, both Paul and I, is we adopt a kind of entrepreneurial mindset when we're supporting organizations. We're keen really to be problem solvers and getting people involved in solving problems. And the third sector isn't really very good at this in Wales. So we're really keen to get people to adopt a different type of mindset. And very similar to what you'll hear from the CDPS trying to advocate is working in the open, learning from one another, and repurposing, not reinventing stuff really. So it's really key for us to start the ground really where there's hardly anything out there digitally that you need to reinvent at all. There'll be some shape or form of what you want to do that other people have tried first. So it's about kind of adopting that kind of mindset of let's look what's out there, let's do more researching. If you were setting up a small business, or if you were a sole trader, one of the key things you do when doing a business plan is market research. So this is what we're encouraging the third sector to do more, and the public sector even, is to have a look at what's out there very often, because it's pointless kind of reinventing wheels when a lot of this stuff has already happened. And my source of inspiration really when I'm doing this research and looking around as to what good looks like is on this page. There's a number of organizations here from Scotland, from England, from Australia even. The Transformation Hub in Australia is a brilliant example of some really kind of forward-thinking processes that are happening across in the digital world, in the third sector and the public sector. So everything on this list, I would encourage anybody on this call today, you'll get a copy of these slides after the event. So, you know, get on to the Twitter accounts of these organizations, get onto their mailing lists, and get familiar with how they're doing stuff, because there's really cracking stuff out there of how these are doing. One example is on the right here with the Catalyst movement in England, and they've got this system called service recipes. So there's a list of about 80 odd recipes of how people have put digital services together and how they've done that. So it's like baking a cake, basically. They give you what the ingredients you need to purchase, software, hardware, training, whatever, how long it needs to go in the oven, and what you're likely to get when it comes out the other side. So that's a great example there, those service recipes of how other people are formatting stuff that we too can pick up from and learn from. So really, really useful tips for us there, and people I follow on a daily basis. So let's get back to this Welsh contest and what the problem we're grappling with. And I'm a big a fan of Welsh sayings. I'm a first language Welsh speaker. If anybody wants to ask any questions in Welsh, I'm happy to do that, trafod yn Gymraeg hefyd. So the Welsh saying is, start at your feet. Dechrau wrth y drad. That's a key place to start when Paul and I started with this work. And what we identified initially is that Wales is a little bit behind the UK when it comes to digital adoption. And the example I've got up here on the screen is UK Government Digital Services was launched in 2011. A similar program in Scotland was launched in 2013. And now, thankfully, we've got services like the CDPS, the Centre for Digital Public Services in Wales. And that's only just starting out, really. It was formed in 2020, but it's only now gathering momentum, getting a full complement of staff and actually doing some good work out there. So we are about 5 or 6 years behind some of the other activities in England and Scotland, but it's nothing to be concerned about, because we can make up that ground, because, as I said, a lot of the experiences that have happened in England and Scotland, they're more than happy to share. So we can accelerate our learning by sharing from maybe some of the mistakes they've done and avoiding doing those mistakes ourselves, so we can catch ground. So the key thing is, in Wales, this digital culture element in Wales, we're not as we're a little bit behind, 5 years behind the accelerated learning elsewhere. But it's a common message we're finding when we're surveying the sector, when we're talking to sister programs that Campws run, like the social enterprise mapping program. There was 300 new start social enterprises over the last 3 years. Only 3 of them had tech-based enterprises. When we're talking to people like Business Wales and the people delivering programs for sole traders and SME support, the similar message comes through. We're not early adopters of digital, and we're not risk takers as well. So this is a thing that is within our culture and something that we're trying to address. I mentioned the survey results. This is a survey we did earlier this year with the third sector, and what comes out regularly as a low scoring element is people's skills and confidence. So we've got to be aware of this when we are adopting and starting to develop strategies. Similarly, recently the Lloyd's Consumer Index, they produced a national survey for the UK, and again Wales scores quite lowly there in comparison with an UK average. So it's something we need to be completely aware of and to work around and work with, really, and be concerned about. Most of my time prior to the pandemic, prior to COVID, was involved with speaking with frontline delivery managers of organizations and trying to convince them, the naysayers as I used to call them, that you need to be thinking about adopting digital. And they were saying, oh no, don't worry, we're a while yet before going down there. But COVID came along and it has been a massive game changer for the sector. So gone are those naysayers now, and everybody, there's a huge consensus really out there now that everybody sees digital as a fundamental part of business operations. So it has been, the last 2 or 3 years has been a real shift, probably more shift in the last 2 or 3 years than there's been over the last 10 or 15 when it comes to digital adoption. Other things that are driving this in the Welsh context is the national digital strategy for Wales. So it's important that we are aware of this strategy, and central to that strategy is the kind of user-centered element of it. And so it is important that that having the user at the center of what you're doing is critical when you're developing a strategy. Each element within around the side of this central strategy is also fundamental. This strategy covers all of us. And anybody, if you're working in the Welsh public sector, private sector, or the third sector, you need to get to grips with how this strategy impacts on your organization. Then the Centre for Digital Public Services, one of the first elements of work they did was introduce a set of service standards for Wales. So these 12 standards are excellent drivers for us to start considering benchmarking where we are currently. Are we doing 1 or 2 of these strategies? Are we doing them all? Or what elements of these strategies can we select to take forward as part of our ongoing developments? So the problem for me started about 4 or 5 years ago when digital strategies started to become a bit of a fashion. Everybody, all of a sudden, a few local authorities adopted a few of them, and everybody wanted one. So it was a bit of a trend or a bit of a fad, I thought, that it all came about that they were all kind of coming out of the woodwork at the same time. The problem was there was a massive disconnect between people developing the strategies and operational staff delivering services on the ground. So we would have either consultants or people coming in writing strategies for organizations, but not really involving the staff at all in how potentially those are being implemented or were to be implemented. So you'd have delivery managers kind of shouting about, yeah, we've got a new strategy, it's brilliant, it's all great, you know, we're all working towards it. Then you ask the same question of a staff member on an operational level, and they wouldn't have a clue. They'd hear the term strategy and they'd say, well, that doesn't really impact me. That's kind of senior managers kind of language, and we just crack on and do what we do on a daily basis. So this was a huge problem out there. A lot of strategies developed, all of them, many of them kind of dysfunctional, either sitting on the shelf doing nothing, or just kind of they go through their term and they hadn't, and then no benefit had been realized at the end of their term of use. So key learning there is, you know, you need to involve the staff in doing it. And this is the key thing for your organization. Number one thing today for me is get to grips with the culture of your organization, understand the culture, because it's pointless having a strategy if the staff and the culture of the organization isn't behind the strategy as wholeheartedly as an entirety. Your strategy will hit the dust and it'll be eaten for breakfast, as this slide demonstrates. So that's a key element of learning from today. So let's start afresh, really. Start from scratch. And what Paul and I, what the focus we do when we start talking to organizations is park that digital term and not get too caught up with the digital element. Let's start talking about business improvement, whether that's a department within a local authority, a third sector organization, a social enterprise, a charity, whatever it is. Let's start the conversation around how can we improve a little bit of what we're doing, how we improve what we're doing now and do it a little bit better. Involve the people, look at the purpose of why we want to do it, and look at the processes of how we're working. There's two options of how to take this forward. You can have the kind of really technical, complicated option, which gives you a higher risk of failure, or you can follow a very simple option, which is what we always advocate, is that let's do these things in a simple and basic manner, so we've got a higher chance of success. One key element is walking in the shoes of others. You know, don't assume that when people are telling you this is how it is, or this is the problem within the organization, or this is what we need to do. Go into the organization in depth and looking at how it functions. Be a mystery shopper. Ask, you know, come at your organization from a client or a end user perspective. Phone up your service helpline and, you know, have an understanding of what people go through when they're engaging with your services. Involve as many people as you can in this process. Then think about, you know, get your teams together, involve your board members if possible. Think about a vision. Set yourself, well, where do we want to be in a year or two's time, in 6 months' time, 18 months? Set yourself a vision of what you'd like that to be, and ask that of your team. And how then think about, if that's where you want to be, how will digital support you to get there? Don't think of it as being a digital objective. Think of it as an organizational objective, and how will digital help you to get to that towards that vision or that goal. Understand how consumers consume digital. Everybody amongst us is a digital consumer, but we all do it in a variety of different manners. So think about the different generations involved in either your stakeholders, your staff, or however your operations run. Each one of these generations will use digital in a different manner. They might all get to the end result at the end, but they all get there maybe through a variety of different routes. So understand that it's not one digital, isn't a one fit for all. It's a completely different fit for everybody. This is a good way also of starting to get into this persona mapping. So you start thinking about people as personas. So when you're when your services are dealing with clients, or your staff or your volunteers, think about the personas and the generation personas that they represent, and how does that fit in to how your organization functions. So the key thing is to establish a definition so that every one of those generations, any one of those different personas understands exactly when you as an organization mention the word digital, you all know what that means to the organization. So everybody from the cleaner to the CEO agree a kind of definitions. And this is the definition we recommend that everybody use. It's been in circulation for many years. It came from the Government Digital Services way back, Tom Loosemore back in 2011. Then it was slightly adapted recently with Catalyst. So the definition that they came up with, and I struggle to beat this with if you try and beat it, is applying the culture and technologies of the internet era to make our organization more resilient and responsive to the changing expectations, needs, and behaviors of the people we support. So that is something that as a team structure, as an organization, you all buy into and understand. So when a memo comes around or an email comes around about digital, that is the context it's meant in. Not you haven't got a dozen people thinking about it in a dozen different ways. Everybody's thinking and understanding it in the same manner. Really, really vitally important. Then think about what a strategy is in its simplest form. Because when you're adopting a strategy, it's going like the previous slide I showed when there was a disconnect between senior managers and operational staff. We want to avoid that. So this definition that Ross McCulloch from Scotland came up with is a really good way, again, of understanding how a strategy will impact upon an organization. It's a digital strategy within your organization is your organization's guide to where digital fits within your bigger journey, that vision we're talking about. They can't be separate because digital issues will affect every part of your organization and every person in it. So again, it will involve everybody. So it's important again that we all know when a strategy is being implemented, everybody's involved in delivering that strategy. And if the term strategy is too high level for people unfamiliar with that type of language, what we recommend is just call it a simple action plan. That's what it is at the end of the day. A strategy is an action plan in its simplest form. So keep things simple, don't overcook things, and just try and involve people in explaining what you're trying to do. Then we focus on why are we doing this? What are we going to do? And who will it impact upon? So you're going a bit more now into the methods of working, of asking yourselves these questions within your teams and getting a consensus of where we want to go. What outcomes we're looking for, how are we going to measure stuff, who will it affect? So what we're really doing here now is going from digital transformation into service transformation, as Sarah Prague kind of really captures it well in this little quote. So it's about service transformation enabled by digital. So digital is complementing your services, and there's less focus on digital being the end problem or the end focus. So just look at how can digital complement the work we're doing. Now it's time to break digital down, because digital is, it's a mile wide and an inch thick, really. It's everywhere. So, and there's 101 different elements to digital. So the key thing now is to break it down into chunks that we can start making sense of. We've got this digital toolkit on the Campws website. The link is in here. And we've broken down 8 elements of how it impacts on the third sector or the social business sector. So again, you can start looking into each of these 8 sections. Within each section, there's more explanation as to and examples of how that can be taken forward and forms a part of your strategic development. I'm not going to go into more detail on this now, but we can go through it afterwards. So then it's prioritizing. So you've identified areas of digital. You've identified 3 or 4 areas. So which one of those is priority for you to take forward? It's not, you can't kind of take everything forward at once. You can't eat that elephant at one sitting, as the saying goes. So let's try and see what chunks we can kind of eat into now and which ones are most important for us to take forward first. For me, the foundational digital, we see a lot of third sector organizations and charities with some compliance element not in place. So your cybersecurity, your GDPR, your legal elements or legal responsibilities of financial reporting, etc. If those aren't in place, those automatically go to the top of the list immediately. If they are in place, then you look at other elements within those themes that I mentioned, that you look at prioritizing and that fit them with how you're trying to improve the services you're offering. It's also it's also key to look for minimal disruption. We can't stop the wheels from turning, really. when we're talking about digital transformation. So we've got to be careful of not being too disruptive. Then we can measure the organization as a whole. So one tool, there's a couple of tools out here. There's two examples on this slide. There's a Scottish example and the English example, which I have up as the image. You can do a self-assessment of a digital maturity check of your organization over 9 themes. So you go through the process. You fill in each theme as to where you are now and where you'd like to be. This then gives you an end result of 9 themes and a spider graph. The dotted line is where you'd like to be in this example, and the solid line is where you are now. So instantly, this gives you a snapshot of how, in this example, well, let's prioritize data and insight, for example. That's scored quite low. Service design is scored quite low. So this tool helps you kind of identify maybe what are your priorities and what you need to think about in moving things forward first. Always consider kind of unintended consequences. If you do one thing, sometimes another thing happens in another part of the organization. So be aware of when you're doing that. Any changes you're adopting, it will have kind of knock-on effects. There's some elements here. The key part for me here is include, when you are putting this together, include those who are not tech savvy. So include everybody in the organization as much as you can. Don't just pull 2 or 3 people that have maybe got a digital interest or a bit of roles around digital. Make sure you include everybody in the process, because it's as I said earlier, it's key that you take this forward collectively and not involve the many and not the few. So beware. This is one, again, the leap of faith. Very often, when you've identified some priorities and you want to go to a better place, don't go from, if you're on a level 1, don't try and aim for level 5 immediately straight afterwards. That will be a kind of crash and burn scenario. It's about kind of doing things slightly better all the time. We've got a terrible phrase in Wales of best practice, and I literally, it worries me, because when somebody is starting from a low starting point and best practice might be really, really high, it's really kind of daunting for them to try and go from the low starting point to best practice. So what we try and advocate is, let's try and do things a little bit better than what we're doing now. So that those kind of incremental, gradual steps is the way of taking it forward. Don't avoid the leap of faith, because that is a recipe for disaster. Plan in the time to communicate where you'd like to be. Maybe what you want to do will only take you from step 1 to step 2 in this example, but it's really important that you plan and communicate to the whole organization as to where you'd like to be. But the key thing here is someone needs to be responsible for that communication. So rather than the department saying, well, I didn't know that, nobody told me, or how was I meant to know that, is the usual thing we hear when we talk to organizations. So, get someone within the organization who is responsible for communicating what's involved in the whole of this process. This example is an Australian example, by the way, from that earlier link I showed you earlier. But as I said earlier, as I also said, is don't think about going all of these steps in one strategy. Your initial strategy might only be step 1 and 2 and 3, and that's enough. And that is those are steps in the right direction, rather than, so don't over pitch it, but just communicate the bigger picture to your organization. Know your barriers. So when you are going into taking actions forward, it's critical that you know what your barriers are, because they will be things you need to navigate as you try to implement these. This is a list of some of the barriers that came through in our earlier research: funding and resources, skills, time. Lack of time comes through quite clearly in a lot of the studies we do. So how are we going to find the time to do this? Is important. If you can't find the time to do it, your strategy is not going to work. So understand your barriers and how you're going to work around those barriers to implement what your goals are going to be. So as we approach now this one page, this is what I'm saying is applicable in a Welsh context by taking into everything we've learnt, Paul and I, up to this stage. So a good strategy is interwoven to your organizational strategy. So whatever your organizational business plan or work plan is, or your strategy is, your digital strategy has to match that. So your overall objectives, how does digital complement your overall objectives? Your digital strategy needs to be short. It doesn't need to be a Magna Carta. It needs to be a few pages at the most. But the strategy itself needs to be as much about the culture as it is about digital within your organizations. It needs to be user-led, so those are your internal staff and your outward-facing clients or members. And this is another key one. It needs to be responsive and agile. So while your main business plan might be set in stone for 2 or 3 years, your digital strategy needs to be very agile and responsive. So if something isn't working, you assess why it isn't working and you change it immediately. Don't just kick the can down the road and turn around and after 3 years and say, well, that's a shame that didn't work. As soon as it stops working, you need to kind of dig into it and understand why it isn't working. And as I said, involve as many as possible as you can. So this is it. This is how you do everything I've just spoken about in the last 15-20 minutes in one place. So this is what is called a house strategy. And as you see, it resembles the shape of a house with a roof on the top. So this house is your organization. Everything under the roof is your staff, your work, your programs and your projects or whatever. If it's a large organization, you could scale this down to be a department or a service area. So the roof, your vision, as we mentioned about the vision. So you set your vision, and that's what's in the roof. This is where we want to go, and how are we going to get there. The definition we spoke about. Everybody under that roof understands we're singing off the same hymn sheet, and we all understand when I get a memo about digital, this is what digital means to us within the organization. You set the commitment, so it's an action plan. So by a certain date in time, you aim to reach these goals. This is a mocked up version, by the way. You imagine this blank for yourself and you fill in the gaps. So the 4 colored pillars in the middle then are actions you take forward. So when you've identified which actions you need to kind of, when you've assessed what you need to take forward, you set up working groups to deal with those independently. So these 4 working groups I've set up here. The first one in orange is around ICT policies. Perhaps our ICT policies aren't up to scratch. Our cyber security isn't up to scratch. We need to review that and see where we are. So, you get a team of people working on that. The pink one then, skills. We've done a skills assessment of the organization. We'd like to kind of make sure that our skills are aligned to our organizational vision a bit closer. So you set up a group to work on that and work and take that forward. The green one then is what insights and data. What have we learned over the last 2 years? What are the trends that are coming out? How are we going to adjust that to fit our future ways of working? You get the senior management working on that and take that forward. And then the blue one then is more of a visionary one around, if you've got a digital lead or someone who's looking at innovation, what are others doing better than us at the moment? What's the competition look like? And how can we improve what we're doing in longer term perspective? So you get people working on that. So all of a sudden now, instead of one person in charge of digital in your organization or a couple of people, you've got everybody. And this is business improvement as a whole. You've got everybody delivering services involved in improving how those services are being delivered and looking at how digital can complement those improvements. And then there's themes, there's internal leadership, strategic, whatever, but it's all underpinned on foundational digital. So make sure if those foundational elements aren't in place, if you haven't got good policies, cybersecurity, if you haven't got kind of those compliance issues in place, those need to be the number one. So and even if it's just one action in those columns taking forward, you don't have to fill every column. Even if you've got let's say you haven't got your cybersecurity aren't where like they should be. Even if you've got one column there looking at that is a step forward in the right direction. And yeah, I should say as well that this one page has been put together as part of Paul and I working on the Newid programme, which is a Welsh Government third sector funded initiative, where we're working in partnership with CDPS, the WCVA and Promo Gymru in helping the third sector, trying to get grips with digital and take that forward. So to close then, my top tips are understand the culture. That will be a downfall if you don't do that initially. Define digital. That's a key one for me because a lot of people see it in different ways, and you could be going down the wrong road if you don't do that. Build trust. Be open and honest. So that communication element. Find someone who's responsible to communicate the message. That will build trust, and people will understand what's going on. We hear all too often of excuses or people saying, "Well, I didn't know that." Well, there's a pity that somebody didn't tell me, that type of thing. There should be no excuses for that. So someone needs to be assigned that job, really. Pitch it as business improvement. You know, people hide behind the sofa when you mention digital very often. So if you want to involve the many and not the few, you know, everybody's interested in improving how an organization works. Not everybody's interested in how digital works in an organization. But so if you focus it on the business improvement, you're likely to get more buy-in. User-led, as I said, speak to people, don't assume anything, get in amongst it all and understand how things work. Benchmark what good looks like. Look at those organizations I mentioned as advocates. Pick up the phone, ask them how they did it and what was wrong, and learn from their mistakes. You'll gain a lot there. And don't be afraid of failure. You know, you're not. You can almost guarantee you will hit snags. You will hit problems. Nothing's going to be a smooth ride. So as long as you approach this with that kind of, I'm not going to be worried when I hit the barrier. There'll be a way around it. If you have the right mindset to it, you will be successful. So I hope I'll share the strategy with you after the event, and I hope that well, I hope you've got some questions maybe to ask us, and we can hopefully answer them and support you as well. Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch yn fawr, Mark. Thank you very much. Brilliant. Okay. I've got no questions in the chat at the moment. I think everybody was rooted to what you were saying. So maybe now's the time. If you want to come off mute, feel free, ask a question via your mics. But if you want to type in the chat because you're a bit shy and you're still eating that bit of lunch, pot noodle, I think Mark was recommending, maybe type it in the chat. But while that's happening, I'm thinking one of the things I'd like to pick up on is the communication part of it, Mark, because you're right. You know, the people we talk to from CDPS, everybody has a different understanding of what the word digital means, and trying to get that throughout the organization is quite tricky, isn't it? Trying to make sure that everybody understands the same thing. For some, it's literally IT. That's what it means. For others, it's about skills or marketing, all those different tiles. So, any tips that you've come across for communicating through your organization, what it means? How do you get those people to shared understandings?
Well, it's that message really of responsibility. I think very often it's easy. It's an easy one to pass. You know, I didn't know that. Or, you know, so I think that's the key thing for me, is that if someone's responsible for it. I'm working with the local authority at the moment, and I've interviewed many departments independently, and what's coming to the surface is people. There's a lot of good stuff happening there, but people aren't aware of it. So and everybody's kind of shying away from being responsible, either to tell others we've done something good, or the other way around, where it's you know, this openness. Really, I think we're not a very open natural culture in Wales, and this is what we're hoping our work with Newid does, and obviously our relationship with CTPS. I know you're trying to advocate very much this open culture. So as organisations, we have to be a lot more open, but also have somebody who is responsible for that communication as well. So so you know, we can accountable for them, so that people are looking to share good news, looking to share things that haven't worked as well, because it's not all rosy in the garden. You know, if someone's hit a snag, what's wrong with asking? We do it on social media quite organically, do we? You know, we ask, you know, where's a nice place to eat or whatever. Why not ask a similar question when it comes to your operational sense? You know, how do I solve a problem like this? I've come up against a snag. Can anybody help me? And more often than not, you know, you'd be surprised that help is very close at hand.
True. Brilliant. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Right, we've got a couple of comments already now then. So Lorne has mentioned it was a fab presentation. Thank you very much. And do you know of any additional support training available to health boards? I dare say you do, but I'm going to dive in on that one and say give us a shout, because we've got some training for health boards lined up after Christmas. But over to you, Mark. Any comments on that?
Well, no, the key thing here is, from obviously the Centre for Digital Public Services that Peter represents is working directly with health boards and local authorities. But where we fit into it all is a lot of services that are delivered in the public sector are delivered by third sector organisations. So this is the dovetail between the CDPS and Campws and Newid, for example. So yes, the third sector will need help as well as the public sector needs help. So yeah, you know, whatever you know, if you're a third sector organisation that's procuring services for the public services, come and see us at Newid, or go directly to Peter at CDPS. Both of us are here move things along really, collectively.
Brilliant, thank you. Lorna says she was being cheeky and she'll get in touch with CDPS. That's brilliant. Thank you, Lorna. Okay, we've had a comment from Nia saying, hi Mark, 2 things come to mind when people think of digital. Costs and annual costs of any system. An assumption is going to replace staff. That's a tricky one. Any thoughts on those 2?
Yeah, it's very true. But I think it's, again, if I go back to how digital has become fundamentally business critical now for third sector organisations, or you've got to cost it into your business plan now. It's got to be there. It's that important really. There's been, over the years, I think there's been kind of pockets of money here, pockets of money there, and there's drips and drabs of things happening. It needs to be operationally more tighter than it's ever been. And it's important that we do find the budget space for it really within our profit and loss and financial projections. It's not there to replace people and stuff. It's there to complement people and stuff. So really, if it's there, there's more likelihood that you could possibly do more and need more stuff. So that's the key thing for me is sometimes that is banded out there as, I think it's come about because of things like banks closing and things on the high street happening. But from where we are coming from delivering services to the people, third sector services, public services, I think you almost need more people involved, but more services being more smooth or happening more efficiently. Really.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I know, looking down the list, I can see Mike is here from Welsh Gov. Mike deals with AI. I dare say you've seen those comments from people before about AI in particular going to replace jobs. I just put you on the spot, Mike. I wondered if you wanted to say anything or share anything that you've come across in that way. How do you overcome that, technology or AI or digital is going to replace our jobs?
Hi, Peter. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, loud and clear. Thank you.
It's kind of back to the main salient point of the chat, really, which is culture and understanding. I think it's entirely reasonable for people to think, particularly with things like AI, the machines are taking over. But they really aren't, and that isn't the intention. It's just another tool in the digital armory. Is the message that I'm trying to convey at the moment around AI and automation is just another piece of the jigsaw in terms of how do we make organizations who are perhaps time poor or funding poor, how can we streamline processes? How can we get people's levels of literacy to a point where they can see those tools and think, actually, we can make those work in our organization and complement the wider business strategy and vision that's already in place. So yeah, no real differences in the message I'm trying to share around AI. It's very much about understanding and culture.
Thank you, Mike. Sorry to put you on the spot there. I don't know if we're out for a lunch as well, but
absolutely fine, Pete.
Brilliant. Thank you. Okay. Yes. Right. I'm looking back at the chat. Paul's made a really good comment in there. Thanks, Paul. It frees up more time from delivery. Yes. Karen has mentioned, thanks, Mark, it was great, like the SOAP idea, SOAP, is especially for helping to get people engaged. Any tips for keeping scope manageable? For example, how far ahead we should look, how we link into overarching relevant strategies without becoming unmanageable and not getting too carried away as we can do with strategies.
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's very appropriate really, because it's got to fit the capacity and capability within your organization. That's the key thing really. So by doing those assessments I mentioned in there, that gives you an indication then as to how far you can literally push yourself or reach, and not without overreaching, because that's been the problem historically. That's why a lot of these have failed, is people have overreached. So it's really, really critical that you do it within, and that's why that kind of stepping stone of incremental benefit is important, because you will gain confidence by those baby steps, and the whole organization will gain confidence. But if you overreach and fail, the whole confidence matter goes the other way. So it's critical for those quick wins and those kind of small wins, so that the teams start to understand, we are going along this roadmap now. We are on this journey. But it's a good question. But make sure you've done that background research. Make sure you've done those checks, as I mentioned, that kind of maturity checks. That'll give you an indication as to where you are now as a baseline, and then again, as I said, those incremental steps from there. Set your baseline and do something that's manageable within the capacity and capability of your own organisation, and that varies extensively across. Everyone's different, really.
Yeah, good thinking. Thank you. Okay, right. So look, we've got one new message coming in. Don't miss that starting step. Yes, spot on, Karen. That's it. Take your time, get it right. Start small, and work in increments. That's it. Completely agree with Mark on reach. Achievability is an aspect that is sometimes lost in the fog of transformation projects. Marginal gains are brilliant. Comment from Mike. Thank you, Mike. Yeah, spot on. I'm just wondering, I'm looking at the time, we've got a few minutes to go. Paul, I'm seeing you here. I'm just wondering if you wanted to add anything you'd want to emphasize that Mark said, or anything, I don't know, anything else you want to cover?
Thanks. I think it's just on that point, really. Yeah, there is fear about Terminator 2 coming across, but what we find, we're working with small organizations where they are so time poor that they are spending a lot of their time on operations where they could be out there delivering and doing what they're there to do, basically. So rather, and there's a cost benefit to that. Can you imagine if it takes your organization, 100 staff, an hour each to do their timesheets, whereas if it was an automated system where you could type it in 5 minutes, suddenly you've saved an hour over 100 staff, times that by X amount of weeks, and suddenly that's a big cost benefit savings. So sometimes it is worth the investment in the digital technology in order to get the financial and time rewards that bear fruit. So yeah,
spot on. Time, we all need more time, especially now in the run up to Christmas. Any solutions would be great. But no, thank you very much. Okay, right. I think we're out of comments on the chat at the moment, unless there's any more. Anybody brave enough to come off mute and ask a question or make a comment? Comments are equally valid at this point.
I'll just add one thing in here while we're waiting, but I really had to go a whistle step tour today. Fairly swift to that presentation. If you're working with Paul or myself in their way, it would be a lot calmer than this. So don't think I work at this speed every day. I'm not that efficient.
Brilliant. Yeah, it's a good point. It's a good point.
Oh, Lorna's come in. Come on, Lorna, give us a question then.
Hi, Mark. I don't know whether I used to work with Mark actually years ago in Wales Cooperative. So obviously I was being cheeky asking about his support. Yeah, I suppose the presentation was really useful, really good to kind of get it on a lunchtime, which sometimes works because time is just of the essence. The reason I've joined, I've got to try and develop a digital strategy for our mental health and learning disability division within an Iron Bevan. We're kind of, and I suppose one of the things for me is capturing where we are, because so many directorates within our division are in so many different points within digital strategy, and even teams within our division are kind of flying and other teams are way behind. So one of the things I'm going to have to do is try and work out how I kind of start from the beginning, but include everyone, because like I say, we've got OT teams that are kind of working on kind of massive projects within homes for people with dementia, but also I've got the side of it where I've got staff looking at digital. We've just gone to Office 365 across kind of the Wales NHS. We're just changing to a brand new patient system. So yeah, that's one of the things I'm struggling with, I think, because everyone is at so many different stages digitally, and that's just within our division. So yeah, I'm kind of looking for any support really. So Mark, this was great. Obviously I'm still in touch with Matt because he's in an Iron Bevan, so he came to the dark side obviously. So obviously Matt highlighted this, but definitely any support to try and kind of get started really. Time is massively an issue, but I don't want to develop a strategy that just sits on a shelf. So I've seen support really is fantastic, so look forward to kind of trying to catch up around that.
I've seen I've seen a lot of local health board strategies, and they're massive. You know, I know exactly what you're talking about. I saw the Hywel blueprint the other day, and I just thought, I mean, it was about 80 pages. You know, and what stood out to me was a lot of that stuff was very in the future. It was probably 4 or 5 years before it would be realized. So I think from you're more operational. So I would look at, don't look too far ahead. Just do something that would work for you in the next 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. That's all you can do, because you know those people you faced with on a daily basis will need treatment tomorrow, today. You know, and what some of that some of those largest, some of the big strategy stuff, that's not going to be realized for many years to come. So try and break it down into sort of, what's achievable within the next kind of 6 months, 12 months, and how many of those other elements are quite futuristic. It's it's great to have that forward thinking. It's brilliant, and but a lot of that won't come into reality for quite a while. So I think all operational staff can do, like yourself, who are dealing with at the coalface, is what's within your control, really.
And I think as well, I've got, and probably a lot of people on this call as well, we've got our staff group and our patient group. So I need to build the digital strategy that's for both, but they're totally different, because obviously the digital strategy around patient care is very different to our digital strategy with our staff and what we're working on there. So it's trying to work where we start and what we do. But that's great, Mark. I think, like you say, not looking 4 or 5 years ahead at the moment and trying to see where we are and kind of breaking it down in a sort of shorter term will probably support. But that was great. Thank you.
That can cloud, I think Mike said something similar, that kind of longer term stuff can cloud the here and now a little bit. So I think that's where you are now. But anyway, lovely to see you, Lorna, and nice. Thank you for coming today.
Thanks, Lorna. And just to bring Paul back in, but just to say, Lorna, if you do drop us a line about training courses for health-specific teams, some of the concepts that Mark's talked about, like, for instance, the Tom Lusmo quote earlier on and how that's adapted, is part of our basics training, digital and agile basics. And the point of that is to be able to come out of it with a really good shared understanding and a practical way of taking things forward. And that's very much start small and grow. So, and yes, we've just run Lunch and Learns. So I need to read that, or let me read it out. CDPS ran a couple of Lunch and Learn sessions around building a vision and setting goals, prioritizing and measuring value. And there's a link there to the Trello board with the videos and the slides in. So that might be of practical, immediate use. Okay, sorry, Paul, you had your hand up. Do you want to come in there, please?
Yeah, it was just about really to emphasize the fact that we all need to be open working here. It was going on back from Lorna's thing about wanting to learn from the whole learning process. I've worked in the public sector and I've worked in the third sector for many years, and we're not really good at it, to be honest with you. We very much keep our cards to our chest, but we're all in this together, and we've all got to go on this journey together. And so, it's just a plea really to be more open, to work with other organisations, not to be siloed. And one thing that they've got in Scotland within the third sector alone is like a peer support group, and it's a WhatsApp group. Now I know that's a nightmare, so it may have to be in another format because of the GDPR issues, but they have about 300 different third sector organisations on their WhatsApp group, and I can put any question about digital on there right now, and I'll have about 10 responses within 5 minutes. And we need something like that, and that is complete, a really good peer support mechanism. And so, like I say, in Wales, all the public sector, all the third sector, we're training it with the third sector ourselves, but the public sector, we're all on this journey together. We're all going to come across the same issues. So yeah, if there is some sort of mechanism where there can be a sort of pool where people can go talk, ask questions and support each other, I think that could be for the benefit of the country.
That's a really good point. Thank you. Yeah, it's been on my mind for a little while. We've got all sorts of issues about which platforms to use, and this one's blocked and this one's not in favor and all the rest of it. But I think you're right. We've got to get past that and get to the point where we can informally share and ask questions and learn from each other. I know one of the things that we in CDPS try to do, and I know you do this as well in Campws, is work in the open. So we'll publish week notes, we'll publish blog posts, we'll talk about things. We, in the skills team, my team, we recently ran like a retro sort of assessment using the service standards based on our training. And we were really open and honest about it. It was quite painful at times looking at what we did well or what we didn't do so well, and then talking about it in the open. That was quite scary in a sense. Oh, just posted the link there. Thank you. But it is so valuable. It's so valuable. We learned loads, and people have talked to us about it, and it's just opened up conversations that wouldn't have happened as well. So yes,
I think failure is okay as long as we're learning from it. I think we've got a major culture problem with fear of failure or doing wrong, but it's actually okay as long as we recognize we're failing or something goes wrong and we do something about it.
And sharing it so nobody else makes the same mistake. Okay. Right, well, I'm seeing no more questions popping up. There's a couple of people said they've had to go for other meetings. Lots of thank yous. Everybody's grateful for the thoughts and input. Love the presentation. And as mentioned, we'll be able to share that with the template as well to all who are on the call. Much appreciated. So unless there's anything else, we'll call it a day there, and everybody can grab a couple of minutes to get a drink before the next meeting. Mark, fantastic job from us. Thank you ever so much. Diolch yn fawr iawn. Mark has been fighting off COVID for the last week as well, so we're doubly appreciative of him giving his time and energy today and sharing his experience. Thank you, Paul, for chipping in as well, because I know you work really closely together on all of this. Much appreciated.
No worries. Thank you for the opportunity. And again, perhaps we could build something, I guess, in a future meeting with around another topic or something, because there's similarities with both elements, isn't there?
Indeed. Yes. Okay. There we go. Thank you, everybody. Have a lovely afternoon. Diolch yn fawr yn fawr. Thank you very much. And we'll see you next time after Christmas. Have a lovely Christmas if we don't see you before.
Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch. Bye.